First, a word to my son, Michael. Michael, I noticed your comment about my age that I found a little provocative, and I would like to remind you that my last will and testament is still in draft form. I want to thank Juan for his thought-provoking presentation. Juan, you vividly demonstrate why investment in the future is so important, and therefore why we must solve this long-term debt problem soon. I take issue with one part, Juan, of your presentation. You referred to me as a modern-day Paul Revere, but I knew Paul very well. And I consider myself far more humble and far better looking than he was. Furthermore, I prefer to think of Paul as an 18th century Pete Peterson. Over the many years I've been thinking about fiscal issues, I've been called many names. By the way, who is this Cassandra person anyway? More recently, I've been called a deficit scold. Well, that may be half right. I probably am a scold, but not a deficit scold, a long-term debt scold, because it is our unsustainable long-term debt that I consider a primary, indeed a transcendent threat to our country's future. When I think of the word unsustainable, I think of Herm Stein, who once said, if something is unsustainable, it tends to stop. Or he said, if you don't like that one, if your horse dies, I suggest you dismount. We have been riding this long-term dead horse too long. I sometimes ask myself, am I more or less alone in seeing this as an unsustainable and transcendent threat? According to a recent opinion survey from our foundation, I can certainly say I am not alone. A stunning 83% of Americans said that addressing long-term debt should be one of our top priorities in Washington. 86% said they are concerned that Medicare and Social Security will put too large a burden on future generations if they are not reformed. In the face of such overwhelming evidence of concern, why haven't we done more about this crucial issue? One reason, of course, is that shared sacrifice is required, and you don't need me to tell you that sacrifice is a word that makes many politicians' blood run cold. And then there is the fiscal version of we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. That is, we shouldn't do anything about our long-term debt challenge while our current economy is soft. Then we are told, let's deal with the long-term debt at some undesignated quote-unquote later. This is a false choice. We can deal with both the short-term and long-term challenge at the same time. If we were to develop a comprehensive long-term plan that stabilized the debt at sustainable levels and that would go into effect only when the economy recovers, the added confidence that business, market, and consumer levels would be a real stimulus to our short-term economy as well. Finally, one hears, occasionally at least, oh, just relax, we can grow out of our long-term debt problem. For us to count on growth alone, our economy would have to grow 2 to 3 times faster than projected growth rate, something that has never been achieved, at least never achieved outside of a Laffer curve. Let's get serious. So what's the answer? For one thing, maybe we need to do a much better job of explaining to the American people not just what needs to be done, but why it is essential. Since this is a conference about America's future, perhaps we also need to draw a clearer picture of two Americas. One America is similar to the one Juan has just described, an America in which we face up to our long-term debt and therefore have the resources to invest, innovate, and grow the economy. The other America is one in which we continue to do nothing about our long-term debt. What would a do-nothing America look like? I see a less prosperous America and one confronted with the risks of two kinds of crises. First, a market crisis brought at some point about the market losing confidence after a series of new short-term debacles, like the super committee, the debt limits, the sequestrations, and on and on. Today, the world wants to hold our debt. That could change dramatically, increasing interest costs. No one can predict when such a market crisis might hit, but clearly it is a risk we should not be taking. There is a second kind of crisis that is much easier to predict, a longer-term growth crisis that the do-nothing approach encourages by crowding out protective investment with unprecedented federal borrowing and interest costs that bias nothing and, of course, are about the past, not about the future. For example, our research team projects that within 30 years, interest costs would rise to more than 3 times the total amount of federal investment, 3 times the total amount of federal investment in education, R&D, skill training, and infrastructure. So we are endlessly told that these are critical investments we desperately need in a more knowledge-based, technological, and very competitive global economy. Yet if we permit these unprecedented costs to materialize, just where do we get the resources to invest? Finally, in a do-nothing America, with its severely cramped budgets, we would be hard put to take on the big innovative projects that typify America history, like the transcontinental railroads, interstate highways, the man on the moon. In short, the American people need to be told not just what we must give up, but what we gain if we were to bring down our long-term debt to sustainable levels. We would gain a rapidly growing America, a secure and competitive America that is also a great innovator, a compassionate America with a secure safety net for the vulnerable. It would be a world leader in such a way because of the skills that we would teach in a knowledge-based economy. So I look forward today to hearing at this conference what opportunities a new America would grasp, and who better help us explore these opportunities than President Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. And President Bill, I've never known whether you had political objectives. Maybe that's what I was referring to. As President Clinton so often says, it's time to get America back in the future. And I think President Clinton and Bill Gates would be great co-CEOs of the future business. They've each made a career of the future, seeing it and acting on it. I'm eager to hear their views on how we achieve the more positive vision of America's future. Please welcome President Clinton and Bill Gates, along with our moderator, Tamron Hill, and thank you all very much for coming.